All right, this is Openstax U.S. History, Chapter 3, Section 2, Colonial Rivalries, Dutch and French Colonial Ambition. So in the previous section, let me get my thing here, 3-1, we talked about Spain and the Spanish colonies in the New World. We're going to talk just briefly about what the Dutch and what the French are doing in the New World as well. So their respective colonies are New France and New Netherland, appropriately named after their respective countries. They do have some things in common. Both the Dutch and the French are interested in the fur trade. That is the exchange of animal furs from Native Americans. So the fur trade relies very much on the Native American population. And typically, these French and Dutch traders will give them European goods, guns, alcohol, metalware, stuff like that. In exchange, receive animal furs, which you can't find them in Europe. They're exclusive or pretty exclusive in North America. Both the colonies of New France and New Netherlands do not attract as many migrants or immigrants, especially when compared to England. England by far sends the most amount of people. So both New France and New Netherland, relatively low in terms of population. Now, where are these colonies located? For Spain, again, recall Central and South America. Is primarily where Spain's located, but in North America, it's New Mexico and Florida, right? That's where the Spanish presence is the strongest. For the French and the Dutch are primarily along the Hudson River in what is modern-day New York City and New York State. So where modern-day New York is, that's where the Dutch more or less settled. The French are down the St. Lawrence River, which is modern-day Canada, and also down the Mississippi River. So the French really traveled along a lot of these rivers in North America. So they make the most inroads. The French are in the interior, although they're mostly low in number. So that's geographically kind of where we're talking about here. So let's jump to New Netherlands. So we talked a little bit about New Netherland. Netherlands is the country. So Netherlands is the country. If this can be a little bit confusing. Dutch is the nationality, right? So we'd say that somebody from the Netherlands is Dutch, right? It's kind of like somebody from America is American, right? Someone from the Netherlands is Dutch. It's a little bit easier to follow with other countries, right? Spain, Spanish, French, or France, French, England, English. Netherlands is the country, Dutch is the nationality, a person from the Netherlands. The Dutch was the primary commercial center in the 1600s, and they had taken over, starting in the 1600s, had taken over most of the Eastern trade from Portugal. And when you look at the Netherlands in this period, 1600s to the 1700s, they're making most of their money. We'll use green here to represent this. They're making most of their money in the East. And in fact, in the New World provides the Dutch with some financial resources, but there are many other places that are far more valuable for the Dutch, right? So the New World is kind of like an afterthought if you're somebody in the Netherlands. One of these joint stock companies, the Dutch West India Company, right? So this is a joint stock company, which is like a modern day corporation who's primarily interested in making money, is interested in trading. The Dutch capital is New Amsterdam, right? That is the capital city located on modern day Manhattan. New Amsterdam is where New York City is located today. And the Dutch, like these other European colonists, do come into contact and conflict with the indigenous population. Part of the response to that, if we'll go up to this picture here, this is a bird's eye view of the city of New Amsterdam. And to guard the Dutch settlement against attack, they constructed this wall right here as a protective barrier. This is the city. And that wall is, in fact, where today Wall Street is located. So Wall Street gets its name from the fortification that the Dutch had built when this was New Amsterdam. Because the Dutch had taken over the Portuguese trade, that also means the Atlantic slave trade. And for the most part, when we think about the Atlantic slave trade, it moves from the Portuguese. Oops. The Portuguese, I lost my pen here. To the Netherlands. That for the most part, the major facilitators of the slave trade during the 1600s is the Dutch. Later on, the English take that over, but that's not really until the 1700s. And because the Dutch colony, New Netherland, and the city, New Amsterdam, had a low population, in fact, some slaves were brought to that area. One of the, I would say one of the more rare parts of the New World located in the north that had a significant African slave population, and that in part is because it was a Dutch possession. In fact, it was slaves that helped build that fortification of Wall Street. And of course, the Dutch, like I mentioned earlier, take over Portuguese trade. A factory is kind of like a trading outpost in Africa, right? So these are where slaves are gathered from Africa, brought to the New World. The Portuguese had built them. The Dutch, by the 1600s, had essentially taken those over. The Dutch, because the colony struggles to attract more migrants, like I said, there are other places in the Dutch commercial world where you can make money. There are better priorities out there. Because of that, you end up with a lot of non-Dutch immigrants, including a lot of Jewish immigrants, which, as we'll kind of cover in more detail, in this conflict between Catholics and Protestants, the question is, well, where do other religious groups like Jews fit into that category? Well, there's not really a side for them, so to speak. And so it's the most religiously tolerant colonies. And you could probably say that New Netherland, of all the colonies in the French, the Spanish, the English, the Dutch probably had the most religiously tolerant colony. It attracted religious minorities like Jews, and also was an area where you could find many different languages. Apologies if I misspelled that. Many different languages that were spoken there. It was sometimes the most diverse of all the European colonies in the New World for that particular reason. The Dutch did try to attract, actually, I don't know how this ended up here. This shouldn't be here. Let's cross this out. The Dutch did try to attract more settlers by granting patroonships. These are land grants, right? So the Dutch were essentially giving away land in the New World in an effort to attract more settlers, but the colony really struggled to do so. This is a crude map of some of the Dutch settlements at the time. Moving on to New France. Now, the French, of course, are also interested in commerce. We have fur trading here. The French, like the Dutch, wanted to make money. Generally speaking, the Dutch offered better prices. The French were more friendly because they didn't have as strong as a militaristic presence. The father of New France, Samuel de Champlain, right? We'll call him the father of New France, was responsible for most of the early French exploration, setting up a lot of the early French bases and cities, including the capital city of Quebec. So this is the capital of the new French colony in modern-day Eastern Canada is where that's located. And the French settlement, like the Dutch settlement, also remained low in terms of their population. It was referred to as a frozen wasteland. And those French who did move there essentially wanted to make money fur trading and then get out and go back to France. There wasn't really a strong permanent French population. New France was even lower in numbers than the Dutch settlement of New Amsterdam. So not a lot of French people going there, and the ones that do go there make their money and then leave. They have no interest in staying. The French did make allies with the local Algonquian Indian. Champlain very much was someone who wanted to create friendly relations. The French, out of all of these European colonists, likely had the friendliest relation with the Native American people and the strongest alliances, right? If we compare them with Spain, the English, and the Dutch. However, intertribal conflicts like those between the Algonquian and the Iroquois could essentially make enemies for France despite their best efforts to extend the olive branch. So the Algonquian, who were in conflict with the Iroquois, the French ally themselves with the Algonquian and by extension make themselves enemy of the Iroquois. Because the trading was so valuable and it helped, the French fur trade really exacerbated the amount of natural resources that were available. Essentially, beaver and beaver skins, beaver pelts were much more in demand. It led to conflicts between Native American groups. We call these the Beaver Wars. These are the wars over the furs. And it kind of goes to show you how European settlement and colonizing of the New World could be both economically, so we'll write this economically, and politically disruptive for Native American groups and tribes, and certainly the influx of trade goods helped to do that. One more thing that we want to add for the French is the desire to spread religion. So I'm going to go to use a different color here. I'll use yellow, because this is something a little bit different than what the Dutch are interested in. As a result of the Protestant Reformation, the Catholic Church established the Society of Jesus, which was an organization to create kind of model Catholic citizens. Now recall, because of the Protestant Reformation, the Catholic Church lost a lot of members. And one of the accusations against the Catholic Church was corruption. The Society of Jesus was designed to fight that. It was to create model Catholic citizens. We called these Jesuits. A Jesuit was a model Catholic citizen who dedicated their efforts to education and conversion, right, to fight that corrupt appearance. And France, because the ruling class is Catholic, you had quite a number of French Jesuits going to this frozen wasteland in order to find more converts. One way to think about it is to say, well, who is willing to go to a frozen wasteland? It's either somebody who wants to make money, because if there's money to be made, people will go, or if you're a very hardcore, dedicated religious person like a Jesuit, you're willing to go to a frozen wasteland to essentially spread the word of God. And that was different than what the Dutch were interested in. The Dutch were not as strongly motivated as the French were. One comparison between France and Spain that we might draw is that the French were a little bit less harsh, a little bit less militaristic with their conversion techniques than the Spanish.